In the spring of 2024, there was a university student in Seoul who called Min Jun, and he was moving into his new home. Now, when I say home, you're probably picturing an apartment, maybe a small one. It's Seoul, after all, one of the most expensive cities in Asia. Min Jun's entire move took 11 minutes, not because he hired great movers, because everything he owned fit in 2 bags, and his new room was 2 payong. If you don't know what a payong is, don't worry. Most people outside Korea don't. 2 payong is about 70 square feet. For my American viewers, the average parking space in the US is 162 square feet. So Min Jun's entire life fits in a room smaller than a parking space. And here's the part that got me when we started researching this. Min Jun didn't get scammed. He wasn't desperate. He looked at the Seoul housing market and did the math like a rational adult. This tiny room was his best available option. He's not alone. These rooms are called goshiwons, and by conservative estimate, more than 100,000 people live in them in Seoul alone. Students, office workers, pensioners, foreigners. In every district of the city. Now, why should you care? Because this story isn't really about small rooms. It's about what happens when a modern, wealthy, hyper-educated society prices an entire generation out of normal housing. And the market responds not by fixing the problem, but by shrinking the product. And if you think that's just a Korea problem, I'd invite you to look at rents in London, New York, or Sydney, because Korea isn't the exception here. Korea is the preview, and that's what we need to explore. Let me give you the numbers first, because the numbers are the whole story. The cheapest goshiwons in Seoul, the windowless ones, start around 350,000 won a month. That's about $240 US. If you want a window, add $50. If you want a window that actually faces outside instead of a hallway, add another 50. A typical Jongno room today runs closer to 450,000 won, call it $310. Now here's the comparison that matters. In Seoul, a standard studio apartment can require a deposit of 5 to 10 million won. That's 4 to 8,000 US up front before you've paid a single month of rent. The goshiwon deposit, 0. The contract? There isn't one effectively. You pay 1 month, you move in the same day. Utilities included, and I promise I'm not making this up. Most goshiwons include unlimited free rice and kimchi in a shared kitchen, 24 hours a day. Some throw in ramyeon, that's the deal. A locked door, a bed, and enough calories to survive. Nothing else. To understand how Korea ended up here, we need to go back about 50 years, and as with so many things in Korea, it starts with an exam. You see, goshiwon literally means exam room. Goshi is the old word for the state civil service examinations. In the 1970s, passing one of these exams was one of the only guaranteed tickets into Korea's middle class. Judge, prosecutor, government official, crack the exam, change your family's destiny. So an entire industry grew up around the students preparing for them. Cram schools, textbooks, and because these students needed somewhere cheap to sleep between 14-hour study sessions. Tiny rooms next to the academies. The first ones appeared in Silimdong around 1975. Nobody thought of them as housing. They were study cells. You suffered in one for a year or two, you passed your exam, you left and never looked back. Then 3 things collided. First, Seoul itself. Today, 50.7% of South Korea's entire population lives in the greater Seoul area. Just over half the country. Think about that. Imagine if half of all Americans lived in and around New York City. The jobs are there, the universities are there, the culture is there. So the people have to be there. Second, geography. Seoul is ringed by mountains, and about 35 miles north of the city center is the most militarized border on the planet. The city physically cannot sprawl its way out of demand. And third, and this is the one Western viewers usually don't know about, Korea's deposit system. For decades, the standard way to rent in Korea was jeons. Instead of monthly rent, you hand the landlord a gigantic lump sum, often 50 to 80% of the property's value, and get it back when you leave. Even the monthly rent alternative usually demands thousands of dollars down, which works fine if your family has money. And if they don't, The front door of the entire housing market is locked to you. So the market did what markets do. It found the crack in the wall. Those old exam cells were already legal, already built, already cheap. And they became permanent housing for everyone the system locked out. Not by design, by default. So let's go back to Minjun's building because the details tell you everything. The 4th floor is for women. The 5th floor is for men. More than 10 rooms per floor, one shared hallway, one shared kitchen, shared bathrooms, and an unwritten rule that governs everything: silence. Not politeness silence. Survival silence. When 30 strangers' lives separated by walls thin enough to hear a phone vibrate, silence is the only privacy anyone has. Some rooms have windows, some don't, and the windowless ones are cheaper. Let that sink in. In this market, sunlight is a line item. Who's actually living there? This is what surprised our research. The stereotype is students, and sure, they're there. But there are also office workers doing the math on a 2-hour commute versus 70 square feet near work. There are foreigners, Chinese students, Western English teachers, a rising share after Korean landlords started rebranding these rooms as goshitels for overseas renters. And increasingly, there are people at the bottom of the ladder with nowhere else to go, day laborers, divorced middle-aged men, elderly people living on tiny pensions. The exam room became a dormitory, and the dormitory is quietly becoming a welfare system. A privately run, unregulated one. What would you do if you were in Minjun's shoes? Some of you are thinking, honestly? $300 in Central Seoul? I've paid more for worse. And that reaction, that's exactly the trap. It's a good deal. That's the problem. It's such a good deal that nobody has to fix anything. Because there is a darker file on goshiwons. On November 9th, 2018, a fire broke out at the Gukil Goshiwon in Jongno, Central Seoul. The residents were mostly older day laborers. 7 people died. 11 more were injured. And here's the part that stayed with me when I read the reports. The building had no sprinklers, not because the owner was hiding them, because the building predated the 2009 fire code that required them, and existing goshiwons were grandfathered out of the retrofit. The stairs were narrow. The escape route on the 3rd floor was blocked. It was, in the most literal sense, legally allowed to burn. The fire forced a national conversation. So tightened the rules, new goshiwons now have to have windows, sprinkler retrofits got pushed on all the buildings, safety inspections got real. But the fundamental math didn't change, because the fundamental math can't change. These buildings exist precisely because they're the cheapest possible container for a human being. Every safety upgrade raises the price, and the price is the entire point. And there's the quieter cost, the one that doesn't make the news. In Korea today, 35.5% of all households, about 8 million people, are single-person households. There's now a word for the tribe of people who do everything alone, onjok. Onja means alone, jok means tribe, a tribe of one. Eating alone, living alone, aging alone. Goshiwons are where a lot of that tribe sleeps. Residents describe knowing their neighbors' coughs, but never their names. The rooms don't just house isolation, they manufacture it. So where does this leave us? Tonight, Minjun will cook his free rice in a kitchen he shares with 30 strangers, carry the bowl back to his smaller than a parking space, and close the door. And here's the uncomfortable truth. He'll tell you he's fine. No debt. No deposit. Total freedom to leave next month. By his math, the goshiwon isn't a trap. It's the only rung of the housing ladder he can actually reach. But should a country as rich as South Korea, the country that gave the world Samsung and K-pop and some of the most advanced cities ever built, should its cheapest housing be a windowless box with a rice cooker down the hall? And before you answer, what's the cheapest room in your city? Because the distance between your housing market and this one is smaller than you think, and it's shrinking. I don't have a clean answer for you. I'm not sure anyone does. But I think we should all be a little uncomfortable that the most honest product in the Seoul housing market is 70 square feet. If you learn something from this, subscribe and turn on notifications. I'll be honest with you about why. This channel is new. The algorithm decides in the first day whether anyone ever sees a video. Next up, in Hong Kong, people pay more than Minjun's rent to sleep in an actual cage. That story is wilder than this one. Stay curious,